walked around the back, and I'll be honest with you, I tried to sneak by the security and go upstairs and be a part of the music school, but when I got to the door, they said, "You're not on the list. You ain't coming up these stairs." I was like, I can't even just go check it out. They said, "Nope, turn around and go back the other way." So I was trying to go and check that out, but here I am, and they found out. They said, "So are you preaching?" And I said, "I am." And you should have seen Sister Bethany's eyes light up. She said, "You got to go the whole time. We got to have all of our time back here." I said, "Well, let me be honest with you, sister." I said, "Those people out there are going to be eating popcorn and playing cards waiting on y'all. Because I'm not going to be able to go the whole time unless the Lord really gets a hold of me and we just go. And if we do, we'll all enjoy it." But I'm so glad to be here. I would like to say thanks to all of the volunteers that we have. We have a good group of young men and young women that help us out. You know, we don't have to whip them with a stick or anything to force them to work. They beg you to work. Brother Austin, what can we do? And I will say the fingernails, some of them are very long. I mean, almost like chicken talons down there. I'm like, how long you been growing them things out and decide to clip them now? But it happens. But we'll vacuum them up with a smile on our face and put hot sauce in your pew if we have to. But we're having a good time. So I'm thankful to be here tonight. Thankful to be able to bring the word. I am the youth pastor, if you didn't know. They say preachers do anything to write down their notes. I found myself, walking through the house and feel the Lord impress something on me. And, I might not have my note that I normally write in around, so I'll write it down or something and try to remember. Because I've learned that I'm not very good at remembering. My wife reminds me. But there was a preacher that said that he was getting ready to preach a sermon, and the Lord dropped something very influential in his heart, and he's like, "I got to write this down." He looked around, and there was no pens or no pencils, he said, but his kids had been coloring in a coloring book on the floor. He said he grabbed a crayon and grabbed one of the color pages off there and began to write down his notes, and he said he just prayed and asked God, "Don't let me preach like a toddler." So that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to do my best not to preach like a toddler, but I am going to try to give you what the Lord has put on my heart tonight. I want you to help me introduce my title tonight, if you would. I want you to look. If there's a person on your left, look there. If there's one on your right, if there's one on both sides, just choose one, and maybe they won't be jealous. But I want you to look to them, and I want you to tell them these words. You are not alone. Now I want you to say it like you mean it. Look and tell them, say, "You're not alone. You're not by yourself." As the Lord began to drop this into my spirit over the past day or so, I began to just look into it do people as Christians, do we experience loneliness? Or is loneliness just a thing that comes before you get saved, and you get a part of the family of God and you never experience loneliness ever again? But I began to look into some research and look at, people that do these things and run polls, and they say that there is a 30% of adults in America experience loneliness almost daily. But then it goes on, it says the younger people, 80% of those feel lonely most of the time. Single adults are nearly twice as likely as a married person to feel and experience loneliness. Then your college students. Around 60% of college students are experiencing loneliness as we speak. So as you look at it, it seems like there's not a single area of people that are not affected in some way by loneliness. So I was like, well, this is just the general public. This is everybody. This is not Christians that feel lonely. This is just your average Joe. But then I began to look deeper. It said 20% of Christians experience loneliness. So 1 out of 5, if I got my Clara math correct. I did graduate from Clara, so that's not, I'm not stealing his thunder. I'm just, I come along a few years later. But it said 20% of Christians also. 1 out of 5 But then you get into the pastoral part. And the pastoral numbers are extremely high. It says that 28% of pastors say that they experience loneliness. And according to Barna polls, they found that 65% of all pastors, that's not, dividing between senior pastors or youth pastors, it says 65%. Said in the previous 3 months, they have experienced loneliness. Those are staggering numbers. Staggering numbers to know that you take interest in why. Why does one feel alone, or why does one feel lonely, as if it's an epidemic? Feeling like you're alone and by yourself and that you're isolated on an island and nobody knows where you are. I'm sure by these numbers, as I've read them, some of you have already found yourself in one of these places. Whether you're a young adult or whether you're college age or whether you're an older adult, wherever you find yourself, I'm sure somewhere, shape, or form, you have found yourself to be lonely. So I began to look at the Word of God. I've looked at polls. I've looked at science. I've looked at the things that were ran on the general public. But I want to know, what's the Bible say? Is there anybody in the Bible that experienced loneliness? Or is it just me? Or is it just you? Is there something wrong with my experience? But then as I begin to look, I see that David finds himself feeling lonely. In Psalms 142:4, he says, I looked on my right hand and beheld there was no man that would know me. Then he says, refuge failed me, and no man cared for my soul. I find David finding himself there. I hear you, David. I hear the loneliness in your voice as you write some of the Psalms. But then I see Elijah. As he's under the juniper tree, he finds himself there. He's feeling lonely. He tells the Lord, I'm the only one left. There's nobody else. I'm alone. He even goes on to say, just go ahead and kill me now. Because he was feeling lonely. Have you ever felt that, or is it just me? Am I the only one that's, I'm asking you a question. I want to get into your personal space, and I want to know, have you ever found yourself being lonely? Have you ever been there to where you looked and you said, God, do you even know that I exist anymore? Do you even know where I am? All these prayers that I'm praying, are they even getting past the ceiling? Or am I just whispering words that are meaningless? Can you hear me? I found myself there. Paul even found himself there feeling as he was lonely and he was by himself. No man was with him, he said. He said, at my first answer, no man stood with me, but all men forsook me. But he said, I pray that God might not hold it to their charge, that they weren't with me. But he's explaining to Timothy there, he's saying, I too felt lonely, Timothy. When I looked around, there was nobody that wanted to be with a man that beat Christians. There was nobody that wanted to think that my experience was legit. Maybe it's the Trojan horse and I'm trying to infiltrate and I'm going to kill all of you when you accept me. I'm sure he felt lonely. Because I know in my own spiritual life, I've been saved now 10 years. Filled with the Spirit, seeking the Lord as much as I know how. But I found myself time after time walking the road of loneliness. There have been times where I'm in a church service, there's hundreds of people around me, but it says nobody sees me. You can hear there are many people that have left churches because of that. They say that they went through, and their preacher or the pastor didn't greet them the right way, so they never come back. Because they're experiencing loneliness and they're hoping, does anybody see me? The pastor obviously doesn't see me because he didn't speak to me. So therefore, this is not the church that I should find myself to stay at and plant roots. So they go on to another. And some, maybe they find refuge, but maybe they continue to search. And because of the lie and the deception of the enemy, they don't find what they're looking for. Because I'm telling you, there is one thing that I preach to these young people often. And I let them know, I said, the devil, if you let him, will drive you to an island by yourself. He will put you there. I said, one, because he's a coward and he's not going to fight you at your fullest. He's going to wait till you're broken. He's going to wait till there's nobody on your side. And he's going to take you to the farthest place that he can find. And he's going to hide you there. And he's going to tell you, see, the preacher don't know. He's not really full of the Holy Ghost. If he did, he'd be here. Your mama's not real. She's not really a Christian, or she'd be here. But yet, you've heard the lie of the enemy. And you've let it stay there. You didn't attack it when it first came. But now you find yourself there. I've been there. And if it weren't for the Lord coming by at the right time, I can't tell you that I'd be here or not. I remember one time that sticks out to me. It's very special. At the time, it wasn't special. I'd only been saved around a year or so. I'm doing my best to serve the Lord. And a friend wounded me. Not a friend on the outside of the church, but a friend on the inside. A friend that I had utmost confidence in, that I would pour out my heart to from time to time. But now I find myself wounded, and I find myself hurt. I'd only been saved about a year or so, as I said. I remember walking this lonely path because I wanted to be strong. I wanted to walk around as if nothing had happened. I don't want you to know that your words hurt me. I don't want you to know that I'm broken on the inside, so I'm going to walk. I'm going to stand tall. I'm going to stick my chest out, and I'm going to march like I'm a soldier because I don't want you to see what's going on. But I remember walking this path. I'm lonely. I'm tired. But then I remember a voice, creepy voice, as it began to sit next to me on my shoulder and say, you know, you gave it your hardest. You know, you really tried real hard. When he was preaching about Eve this morning, I identified with how Eve was talked to because I've heard that voice. I remember that voice coming and saying, you know, brother, and he's going to pump you up. You know, brother, you sure did. You fasted. You've been praying. And you gave it your hardest, and guess what? It wasn't enough. And I should have recognized at the beginning of the conversation that it was not the voice of Jesus. But I entertained it a little too long. Because I remember that voice every day. He did not miss one. For probably 6 months, he came and camped out with me. He stayed where I stayed. He went where I went. He walked with me. He said, you know, brother, you gave it your hardest. You really tried. You're a great preacher. You've been praying and seeking the Lord, but it just wasn't enough. And then he didn't stop there. You know, the enemy never stops until he's fully got you in his grasp and he kills you. But he began to leave those words alone. And the next words he said is, even though you didn't do your best, or you did do your best and it wasn't enough, I think you should just give up and quit. And I remember at first thought, I can't give up. It's crazy. But it didn't stop. He'd come again and again and again, and he would say, you just stop. Just give in. Just give up. And I remember the day that I began to listen. And I began to say, you know what? He's right. And I found myself in a very sticky place because I began to be deceived by a voice that wasn't for my good. But I remember the place that I was right here. All I was doing was coming to pour water for the preacher. I'm in the struggle of my life. I remember as I walked down this aisle, coming up to the edge of the staircase, I'm getting ready to pour it, and I heard him say it again. You need to quit and give up. And in my own spirit, I said, you know what? I think that's my best move. I think that's the best choice for now, is to just give up because I gave everything to you, Jesus, because I'm confused. But then another voice comes. And he begins to show me a picture. I wouldn't call it a vision. I would call it more of a daydream. As I'm walking and I'm pouring the water, I see a battlefield, and I see a young man that's a soldier. I see that he's got a backpack on. He's got a little gun in his hand. He's going through a battlefield. I can see lights flashing. His bullets are going across this battlefield. And this young man takes a shot, and he goes down, and he lays there. And the voice of the Lord came, and he said, son, if he stays there too much longer, the enemy's coming to finish him off. He's going to come by, and he's going to find him wounded, and he's going to pop one in his head, and he's going to be dead, and he's going to be gone, and it's going to be over. He said, son, you've got to get up and go forward. You've got to get up and keep marching, and sooner or later you will find refuge. It might not be instant, but you keep moving forward. And all I knew to do was say, yes, sir. And I remember standing up and walking in my own spirit as I go forward with Christ. And that voice began to get fainter and fainter, because now the real voice of heaven had came and began to speak to me. I like how the writer put it. Because Paul, he was telling Timothy, there's nobody around me, there's nobody with me. But I like what he said in the very next verse in 17. He said, but the Lord stood with me. He didn't say that the Lord was cowering down in the corner. He said, but the Lord, Timothy, if you can hear anything I'm saying, the Lord stood with me when nobody else did. Whenever nobody was around me, when nobody knew what island I was on or where I was at spiritually, Jesus stood by me. The word says there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And I found that. I found him for myself. I found the man that whenever I go to him, I can kneel down. It don't matter what I bring to him. He's okay with it. He'll just come by, and I love it whenever I feel like the hand of the Lord places his hand on top of my head, and it's just me and him. I walk in this place, and I begin to pray. His spirit meets me at the door, and he don't leave till I leave. Just this week, I come in here just to pray by myself, and as soon as I open those big brown doors, he met me. And every step I took, he took. I'm telling you, Lord, I make you feel like you're the only person on the planet. Sometimes he makes you feel so special because he knows you need it. Because there are going to be times that you walk a lonely path and you're by yourself. But you've also got to learn. Don't trust your feelings. Even though you might feel that he's not there, that couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes you're going to go through hard times. Sometimes it seems like you go through more hard than you know good. But I can tell you this, he promised in his word to never leave nor forsake. He said, but I'll be with you. And I hold those words dear, because I know that I cannot in my own strength walk this Christian life. If a man ever could have did this life effectively, Jesus never would have had to die at Calvary. But because no man could complete the law, Jesus had to come. So I know that I might find myself under a tree and I'm upset and there's nobody around, seems like, but the Lord's there. The Lord's with me. Even though that I can't hear him at the time. Maybe I'm not hearing revelations as a fresh every morning, but that doesn't change his position. Just because you're not feeling or you're not hearing doesn't mean that he's not there. You've got to believe and trust in the word. Every time he preached this morning, I wanted to say I'm going to preach part 2 of what he preached this morning. And I didn't read his notes until after I did, so I didn't get any of this from him. Just in case you were wondering. But you've got to know that despite how you may feel currently, you might feel right now, it might be you that I'm talking to today. You might be finding yourself and there's nobody around. Your husband or your wife might have not greeted you this morning and said, honey, I hope you have a great day. Maybe you're finding yourself and you're all depressed and you're all anxious and you're fearful of what tomorrow's going to bring. That's why you've got to put your trust in somebody that knows what's in tomorrow. Somebody that knows what tomorrow's going to bring. Whenever you get there, he's already waiting for you. He's waiting there, and he knows, and he has exactly what you need. If Brother Rick would go ahead and head this way. As I'm getting ready to close, I want you to know I didn't come through and do a background check and figure out who was dealing with loneliness today. But sometime between Friday morning or Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, the Lord began to lay this on my heart. To let you know that you may feel lonely today. You may even feel lonely tomorrow and even into next week or next month. But don't trust your feelings. You've got to know that he's there. And that he's with you. And that he's all that you need. The greatest words he's ever told me, and he's told me more than one time, is he said, son, I'm everything you need. Everything. Sometimes I did not really understand what he was meaning when he told me. But fast forward a few weeks when the problems or the trials came, he was letting me know this is coming and I'm going to be exactly what you need. I'm the remedy for every problem that you have. Would you stand with us? If it be okay, I'm just going to do a general altar call. I know sometimes people are more nervous to break the ice in a big crowd. But I know for a fact that at least one of you or two of you are who I was preaching to. And I'm going to give you the chance to find your refuge around these altars. I know a lot of times we get it in our head that Jesus is only in the church house. But I promise you, he'll go home with you. You don't have to wait till Sunday or Wednesday to get what you need and to let the Lord know what you're going through. Lord, I'm lonely, and I need you to come and comfort me in only the way that you can. You don't have to wait a week, 2 weeks. We might not have a Wednesday, and you say, well, man, I'm not going to get to experience the Lord for a week. That's not true, because he goes home with you. I've had some of the most powerful prayer meetings of my life in my closet. And I know what you're thinking, how in the world you fit in that closet? It was a big closet, okay? It was big enough to have a little fold-out chair in. But it's there that I found out that when I can't feel him, that don't mean that he's gone. And I found him at my own altar, on my bedside, or my office, wherever I find myself at. That he'll show up in just the right time. And he's always got exactly what I need. So I'm going to ask you, if you would, just come and let's seek the Lord a while.